No big deal.
Okay, we will call to order. And Amy, may we have a roll call?
Yes. Mr. Fuller, Mr. DeLomo, Mr. Manel,
Here.
Mr. Van Wagner,
Here.
Mr. Ashkenazi,
Here.
Mr. Mamie,
Here.
Am I muted now?
Mrs. Tallarico.
Here.
Oh my gosh. Mr. DeGenera,
Here.
Mr. Puglielli,
Here.
and Madam Chair.
Here. Okay, we can stand for a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
United
of
States of
America
America.
and to the republic for
Republic
which it
which
stands,
stands
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
versus rule.
Okay, the notice requirements of the open public meeting law for this meeting have been satisfied. A copy of the notice having been sent to the Asbury Park Press and the Coaster and filed in the office of the Township. All meetings will be video and audio taped and shown on the Township of Ocean Community Cable Channel, Channel 22 on Verizon Fios, and Channel 77 on Cablevision. We have one continued case, Seaview Corporate Park, Block 149.01, Lot 1.01, 2603 Route 66, Ocean, Zone 0120. This is an application to construct and operate a facility providing assisted living, long-term care, skilled care, rehabilitation, and memory care. The construction will require several variances, including lot depth, building height, number of units, parking spaces, among others. The attorney for the applicant is Mr. Jeffrey A. Donner. Okay.
When the meeting was concluded about 6 weeks ago, we were in the process of hearing comments from the public. I believe we have a 3-minute limit, Mr. Kirk,
Yes, we do.
on those, and anybody who has spoken has already spoken, and we would like to entertain comments from those people who would like to comment who have not previously so commented. So I don't know, Madam Chair has to acknowledge them, so they're not in the room, they're not raising their hand, so you
Yes,
figure it
so-
out, you want.
Okay, at the bottom of your screen, hopefully you will see a reactions button, and there is a feature to raise your hand. If for some reason you're having difficulty, cannot see it, when there's a pause, you can try to wave, and I will also ask board members if they can help out and kind of scroll through, because I have multiple screens. So the first hand that I,
Madam Chair, the only thing I would say also is that we will stop any repetitive questions. If it's been asked and answered once, then we'll, that would be the end of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's not actually questions at this point, it's comments.
Comments, that's right.
And they're
We have
basically
repetitive
testifying, but if the comments have been already presented, suffices to say, you agree with so-and-so on that comment and not reiterate it. Did we swear each person in, Shawanda, last time as they spoke? Because they are testifying.
yes, name and address and firm.
You'll swear them in. Okay.
Okay, so first I see Linda Morris. If you can please state your name, your address. And
She's
you're
muted.
Miss Linda Morris, if you can hear me, you're muted.
Can
Okay,
you hear
thank
me
you. You
now?
can state
There
your
we
name
go.
and
Okay, my name is Linda Morris Balo. I live at Nobility Crest in Building 5, Unit 5102. I've lived at Nobility Crest for 5 years and in Building 3. And then when the new buildings were built.
Miss Morris, Shawanda's
Do
going to
you have-
swear you in because you're going to be
You have to swear.
testifying.
Yes, my
okay, do you
impact
affirm, Ms.
statement.
Morris,
Miss-
Ms. Morris,
Miss Morris.
just 1 second. Do you affirm to tell the truth?
Yes,
Okay, you have 3 minutes for your statement.
okay. My impact statement is influenced by the surrounding of Nobility Crest and the wonderful community that I'm happy to live in. I sold one unit in Building 3 and bought a new unit in Building 5 because I wanted to stay with people that I had made friends with from moving from Ohio to be near my grandkids. My impact statement is influenced by this wonderful neighborhood and my fear that I will be directly impacted in a negative way from the building of the issue of Arbor Manor. I'm 76 years old. My hearing is compromised. I wear hearing aids. And to know that Freehold Road may be used with the decibels, with the rumbling, I feel that my quality of life and my hearing will be negative impacted. I ask that you vote no on this issue and that you will not allow Freehold Road to be used in the future for the transportation of vehicles on this scope. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, it just says iPhone, woman with, I believe, black glasses on, black collared shirt.
Ms. Morris, can you please put your hand down so that we can try to keep, I thank you.
Just hit the reaction button in the hand again. Okay, yes, you are unmuted. If you can state your name, your address, and if you affirm to tell the truth.
This is Helene Michon. I live at 7 Center Street in Building 6. And I'd just like to thank you for letting me have a chance.
Just do you affirm to
We need
tell
to
the
swear you
truth?
in.
I affirm to tell the truth.
Okay,
what you
have up
said?
to 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure that the members of the board have heard many traffic experts over the years. And never once have I heard them report that the project would add to the congestion to the area. With that said, and with no disrespect, I could not help but notice that nowhere, I said that already. Oh, the impact to Cedar Village Boulevard caused not only by the staff, but by the daily addition of the service vehicles in and out. I didn't hear any mention of garage trucks, recycling trucks, medical waste, disposable trucks, post office trucks, food delivery, supply trucks and vans, UPS trucks, FedEx vans, Amazon vans, cars going in and out, vendors from outside, professionals, along with cars from friends and family visitors. Upon closing, I would just like to touch on the air quality that will be affected due to all the extra traffic along the building process that will take a few years. Many of our residents have breathing issues, allergies.
I can't hear anything.
The project would most definitely have a very big effect on many of our residents regarding their health. Please take this statement into consideration when making your decision, and thank you very much for your time.
Hey, Lisa, Cedar Village, if you can state your name, your address, and if you affirm to tell the truth.
Hi,
How do I
Lisa
get my-
Gotchman, 29 Cedar Village Boulevard, in Cedar Village, and I affirm to tell the truth. First, I'd like to discuss the entryway to,
Joanne, she wanted to swear in.
She did. She said she affirmed to tell the truth.
Did you affirm, ma'am?
yes, I do.
Thank you.
The entryway that is proposed coming onto Cedar Village Boulevard to go to Arbor is going to be extremely dangerous. I believe that the traffic engineer downplayed the impact of the 90 or so employees that are going to be coming in and out of Arbor at shift changes, in addition to all of the other vehicles that the woman who testified before me mentioned. Recently, there were 2 car crashes right at our intersection where residents who were leaving Cedar Village Boulevard were plowed into by cars, 2 separate times within the last couple of months. And I believe that the traffic engineer downplayed the issues that will happen because of this increase in traffic. Also, the hill that goes up to Arbor from Cedar Village Boulevard is going to be incredibly dangerous in inclement weather. If it ices up, if it freezes up, if there's rain, these cars, trucks, large vehicles, garbage collectors are going to be coming down that hill. There will be residents from Cedar Village Boulevard waiting on Cedar Village Boulevard to exit the community. If the cars coming down that hill can't stop, they're going to crash right into the residents who are waiting for the traffic light to change. My other concern is, and as mentioned, it really has not been discussed. Nobody talked about it. At one point during a meeting, I did want to ask a question. I was told I couldn't because I had exceeded my time. The problem is going to be the noise from the garbage, recycling, and hazardous waste collections that are being picked up at the rear of Arbor. And that's where the rear of Arbor abuts homes on Cedar Village Boulevard and Cedar Village Boulevard and the homes across the street from Cedar
Did you know
Village Boulevard.
that Harriet Strauss lives in
And
North?
I'm sorry, somebody else is talking. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be rude. It cuts into my time. And the noise and the pollution coming from those trucks. At one point early on, somebody had testified, one of Arbor's experts had testified that they're not going to change the size of the dumpsters. What they'll do is they'll have increased numbers of trucks coming in to take away the garbage, the human waste, the dangerous hazardous materials that are going to be coming out of an assisted living center. So instead of having larger dumpsters, which I'm not in favor of at all anyway, they're going to be increased in pickups. That's going to be more trucks, more pollution, and more beep, 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 beeps every time a truck backs up into, in order to get that garbage to be disposed. This was not addressed. I think it should have been. It also, there was no discussion as to vermin and animals that will be attracted to these dumpsters. Again, the proposed area backs up to Cedar Village Boulevard and also, I believe, to Nobility Crest. And all of us residents are going to be impacted by the noise, by the vermin, by the pollution, and no one from Arbor, I believe, discussed any of that.
Okay,
Thank
Lisa,
you.
thank you.
Michelle L., if you can state your name, your address, and will you affirm to tell the truth?
Hi, I'm Michelle Lupo. I live in Nobility Crest, Unit 3113, which is in Building 3. Yes, I affirm to tell the truth. I'm not going to be repetitious. We all heard all the testimony from the expert witnesses, and all I can say is they did their job. They were paid by the developer to say there shouldn't be a problem. But when there is, they're not going to be around here. They don't live here. They're not going to face the consequences. We live here, and things always go wrong. I have to believe there was a reason this land wasn't zoned for a project of this magnitude. Please look at why, the reason why this was not zoned for that type of building and what type of structure. Please just do the right thing. Nobody wants that here. We have a really nice community. This is going to wreak havoc. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Okay, Lisa and Michelle, if you can also just lower your hands with the reaction button.
Sure.
And Harriet Strauss, you can state your name, your address, and if you affirm to tell the truth.
My name is Harriet Strauss. I'm at 7 Center Street, Building 2, and yes, I affirm to tell the truth. So I want to just start by thanking the board for a very, very long process and spending a lot of time considering this. I moved to Nobility Crest after my husband passed away so that I could live my senior years in a quiet, comfortable community. As a speech language, pathology, and audiology graduate, I have some serious concerns about the noise impact of this project. According to the CDC, any noise over 70 decibels over a prolonged period of time may start to damage hearing. A single exposure to excessive noise can cause permanent hearing loss. An average dump truck will generate 84 decibels and an average bulldozer 80 decibels. OSHA requires employers to implement a hearing conservation program when noise exposure is at or above 85 decibels or averaged over 8 working hours. That ruling is meant to protect workers. How will the residents of Nobility Crest and Cedar Village be protected while 150,000 cubic yards of material is being moved and the building is being constructed? There are other objections that I have about the size and scope of this project, but this is my main concern. And I hope that you will consider the negative impact this project will have on our senior communities. I'd venture to guess that these aren't conditions you'd want to live with now, or especially in your retirement years. Thank you.
Next, Marcia Ratchlin, you can please state your name, your address, and if you affirm to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And if you can just unmute.
Marcy Racklin, 7 Center Street, Building 4, Unit 4305, and I affirm to tell the truth. Okay. I have lived in Ocean Township for over 45 years. I moved to Nobility Crest a few years ago from a home in Ocean Township to continue to enjoy my life in Ocean. When purchasing a unit at Nobility Crest, I asked about the adjacent property and understood that it was zoned for 55 and over or light commercial. The purpose of zoning is delineating the use of property in a town and, most importantly, to protect the health and welfare of its citizens. The owner is asking for zoning changes to this property, impacting the homeowners, taxpayers of Nobility Crest significantly, both in potential risk to our property during construction and long-term health of the owners. I think the board has to put yourself in our situation. A half a football field away or less, residents at Nobility will have garbage dumpsters placed with garbage trucks entering and leaving adjacent to their property. This is not appropriate for the current use of this property. Think about how this garbage disposal issue would impact your life. Dumpsters, storage for solid waste, moving garbage trucks daily in and out of this property, creating noise and air pollution on a daily basis. These are just some of the reasons why this property must not be rezoned. Imagine a windy summer day sitting on your home balcony with trucks entering daily, throwing off dust and debris on your property. Again, just another reason why zoning ordinance we have in place should not be changed. The builder has every right to build what the zoning permits. And of course, minor changes are often permitted. But in this case, the property is significantly altered to generate income for the developer without proof that there is even need in our township. And keep in mind that the developer purchased this property knowing what the zoning was. The builder's rights are protected to build what the property is zoned for. We as homeowners expect the same courtesy. We hope you will, as members of the board, assure that the property conforms to what it is zoned for and protects hundreds of homeowners and taxpayers in Ocean Township. Thank you.
Next, Rose, if you can please state your name, your address, and if you affirm to tell the truth. And you're muted. It says Rose, but there's a gentleman speaking. You're muted. If you
Can you hear
state
me
your
now?
name, your address, and if you affirm to tell the truth.
Yeah, I confirm to tell the truth. My name is Ronald J. Lawson. I live at 1 Cedar Boulevard, Cedar Village Boulevard. I border right at the base of at the property where they're gonna build this building. And it's gonna overlook our street, Cedar Village Boulevard. My objection is the sunlight is gonna be blocked out because the building is gonna be built on a high hill. And it's gonna block out all the sunlight going to Cedar Village Boulevard. I recently moved in 2 months ago. I just bought this property and now they're changing everything around it. So I object to that. And I notice every day wildlife in the back of my house where the trees are and the going up, lots of deers and stuff. That's gonna really affect wildlife and sunlight. And I just contracted for solar power on my roof, and that's gonna block out my sun. So that's mainly my objections, but mainly the environmental impact of the entire area is gonna be affected. Thank you.
Dina De Niro, you can state your name, your address, and if you affirm to tell the truth.
Hi, my name is Dina De Niro. I live at Nobility Crest, unit 5208, and I affirm to tell the truth. I am the primary caregiver of my 90-year-old father and my mother and stepfather, the latter of whom suffers from dementia. Nobody would benefit from this development more than me, but I'm begging the board not to approve this project not just because so many other assisted living facilities already exist in the immediate area and all are operating under capacity, but because since the pandemic, the trend for elder care has been for families to keep their loved ones at home and let them age in place. According to the AARP, 77% of adults 50 and over want to remain in their home to the end of their days. This number has been consistent for over a decade now. Aside from the noise, pollution, and dust, the last of which will cause debilitating headaches in both me and my dad due to a hereditary sinus condition, the most devastating thing about this plan is the loss of wild green space that is proven to offer solitude, stress reduction, and a safe haven that is just the craziness from my current life. In the last 18 months, I've taken my dad to the ER 5 times, trained and then lost 4 home help aides, burned through 3 elder law attorneys, incurred 2 major house moves to reside in Nobility Crest, and endured a major surgery on my dad's carotid artery. But I am committed to letting both my parents, all 3 of my parents, age in place with dignity and care. Another assisted living facility is not what is needed here in Ocean Township. What is needed is a library system that delivers books to seniors the way Montclair and Essex County do, better and social engagement opportunities for seniors, and above all, more skilled caregivers and visiting nurses to support those aging at home. Thank you for your time.
Marvin Golden, please state your name, your address, and if you affirm to tell the truth.
Marvin Golden, 31 Boxwood Drive. And I do affirm to tell the truth. I had an opportunity to speak late at night at the last meeting, but I think circumstances have changed because there was an effort to end it all on that evening. And then there was a realization that that couldn't be done. So I have 2 new things that I would like to say. The first is that the timing for the traffic light has changed dramatically since the Arbor traffic expert gave testimony. He had indicated that leaving Cedar Village Boulevard, the light was for 30 seconds, and on Route 66, it was for 90 seconds. Last week, the week before, and today again, I timed the green light leaving Cedar Village at only 10 to 15 seconds. And however, even as the traffic expert testified at 30 seconds, we've noticed over the many years we've lived here that it frequently only allows 4 or 5 cars to get through at 30 seconds. Believe me, at 10 to 15 seconds, it's troubling to get 3 or 4 cars through. That's the first item. The second item is based upon what I heard at towards the end of the last meeting. From the outset of these proceedings, which was quite some time ago, and announcements were made on a number of occasions that a vote would not be taken place until the public was heard from. That same announcement was made on more than one occasion. Just prior to the abbreviated public comments at the last Zoom meeting, at least 2 members of the board indicated they were ready to vote without hearing from the public. Obviously, they had made a determination prior to hearing any evidence presented during the public comments. I suggest respectfully to the chairperson of the board that any member of this board who announced such a decision at the last meeting prior to the public comment be instructed to abstain from voting on this issue. Thank you.
Tricia, if you can state your name, your address, and if you affirm to tell the truth. You're muted, Patricia. Patricia, if you can hear me, you are muted. Okay. If you can state your name, your address, and if you affirm to tell the truth.
Yes. My name is Pat Cohen. I live at Nobility Crest, Building 5, and I confirm to tell the truth. In a recent article, the American Journal of Nursing, which I get on a monthly basis, shows that more families are choosing to have their family members age in place at home. And Medicaid is now paying family members to take care of these people. And so is the VA paying people, family members, to take care of their loved ones. So the need for nursing homes is actually dwindling. And so my question is, if that be the case, do we need a nursing home here at Nobility Crest? Thank you.
Nancy, you can state your name, your address, and if you affirm to tell the truth.
Good evening. My name is Carolyn Van Volkum. I live at Nobility Crest, Building 5. I affirm to tell the truth. I want to thank you for all the time and effort you have put into reviewing this application. I would like to request that you deny the application for Arbor Manor. You would be hard-pressed to find anyone in Nobility Crest or Cedar Village that advocates for its passage. The Arbor Manor proposal calls for the construction of a towering 4-story structure in the middle of 2 residential communities. The proposed site is a property not zoned for nor geographically suitable for such a building. The small parcel of land with wetlands, endangered wildlife, and flora would better benefit our township if declared a green zone, or if New Jersey's Green Acres program could be persuaded to purchase it as open space. The Arbor Manor proposal offers only escalating hardships in our lives and depressed values on our properties. I ask that you put yourselves in our place and please deny the application for Arbor Manor. Thank you.
Claudia Nasser, you can state your name, your address, and if you affirm to tell the truth.
My name is Claudia Nasser. I reside at 7 Center Street, Unit 3310, Nobility Crest, and I affirm to tell the truth. Good evening, board. I thank each of you for your time for volunteering and for your public service. You have heard months of testimonies from both sides, and you have heard the voices of the people of Nobility Crest and Cedar Village. My neighbors and friends, we are all seniors in this community. You heard the developer paint a colorful picture of what a wonderful project they proposed. With so many facilities within 5-mile radius offering the same services, the need for a project of this size and scope is not needed, and in addition, not a permitted use for this property. We seniors living in our last years or decades all send you compelling messages to oppose the zoning change that developer seeks. My neighbors and fellow seniors
Ms. Nasser, are you there?
She muted herself somehow.
If you can hear me, we cannot hear you.
I'm sorry, my apologies. My phone went into mute automatically. Okay, let me repeat. Okay, my neighbors and fellow seniors said it all. I do not want to take the board's time at this time and repeat what has already been said by so many. But I will ask you to please not forget the cry for help that everyone sent you. I will say, however, expecting that all of you already made up your minds and are ready to cast your votes, I am here to appeal to those of you that are ready to vote yes. To you, I ask you to remember the voices of the people, and I ask you to please vote no. Our future living in tranquility and joy depends on you, and it's on your hands. So please vote no. If the sites don't fit in the land, then you must vote no. If your questions have not been fully answered, you must vote no. If you know the proposed entry and egress to the proposed building is a winding, sloping roadway, slippery on snow and ice, presenting all types of hazards, then you must vote no. If a certificate of need has not been presented to you, and it has not, then you must vote no. If it violates the master plan for the proposed use of this land, then you must vote no. Thank you for the opportunity to address you tonight.
James R. Johnson, please state your name, your address, and if you affirm to tell the truth.
Yes, James R. Johnson, 8 Sequoia Parkway. I'm a resident along with my wife. We moved in 1.5 years ago or so. And my concern is echoed from our fellow residents in that angled road that's going to come down into Cedar Village Boulevard is a scary situation, especially in the cold months where you're going to have snow and ice come down. It'll be melted or de-icers put on it, and then it travels down onto Cedar Village Boulevard and refreezes. And I think that's a major concern. Noise is, of course, everything everybody said is echoed, so I won't be repetitive. The traffic, seems to me that's understated, as somebody said, with the trucks, the garbage trucks, the smell of the garbage, the construction for a long period of time, and the traffic at the traffic light, as Marvin had mentioned. That light is no way 30 seconds. And even if it was 30 seconds with the rate of the traffic that's going to come out of the villages and the arbor, there's no way you're going to sit there for several lights because it changes very quickly. People don't move as fast as whatever the count is that they're utilizing. And it's a major traffic situation is my belief, so. And the runoff is most important because even now, there's some water that comes off of that hill onto the roadway and it freezes and they put salt down to try to thaw it out. But I can't imagine when there's a building and the water is coming down from that and a roadway that's channeling it right down. It'll be a ice skating rink. So I'm just concerned for the safety of my wife and I and my fellow residents. So I would urge you to vote against this project. Thank you for your time.
Maria Garofalo, you can please state your name, your address, and if you affirm to tell the truth.
Yes, I am Maria Garofalo. I live at Nobility Crest, and I affirm to tell the truth. By definition, and I quote, "A master plan is a document adopted by the planning board which sets forth the vision and policies for land use as desired by the municipality. The master plan is a principal document that addresses the manner and locations which development, conservation, and/or preservation occur within the municipality. Not only is this application not a permitted use according to our master plan, the variances that the applicant seeks are so broad and wide that by approving this application, you are allowing the developer to rewrite Ocean Township's master plan to his benefit and not to the benefit of Ocean Township. I ask you to please take this into consideration when making your decision. I want to thank the board for their time and their efforts in this very long and drawn out all these meetings. So thank you very much for your time.
Okay, I do not see any other hands raised. Is there any other comments from the public? Are there any other comments from the public? Is this the same Nancy that spoke?
Wanda, I think
Mr. Falvo's trying to get in.
I'm sorry, who is?
Mr. Falvo.
Oh, okay, Mr. Falvo, if you can state your name, your address, and if you affirm to tell the truth.
I believe that Mr. Falvo spoke last time.
I did.
Okay.
So the ground rules are one time, as I understand it. I think we heard from Mr. Falvo.
So then I'll speak as an attorney for my wife in this situation. All right?
Go ahead, Mr. Steinberg, you're ruling? No, you've got to be unmuted.
You're muted.
You're muted. We can't have a muted attorney.
Well, yes, you can. It would be good. We can mute them all. If he's representing a client, he's got the right to speak at this point.
He says he's representing his wife, okay? His wife and Mr. Falvo
I'm
are
also
one unit.
representing Edward and Claire Day on Boxwood and Gail Parenti at 33 Cedar Village Boulevard.
Have you submitted those credentials and advised the board and me of that representation before
No,
2
I
minutes
have
ago?
not, but I haven't done that in other cases either.
I think we've heard fully from Mr. Falvo, and I just feel that we have a lot to accomplish tonight, and he's had a full and fair opportunity.
I can be very brief, Mr. Donner. But I
It's
think
up
the
to
board.
It's up to Mr. Steinberg.
I didn't want to cut anybody off. I promise to be brief
I will.
and not repetitive.
I will. I think the board should take into consideration several factors. And
Now,
determine,
are you actually giving a summation on behalf of your clients?
no,
Well, you're testifying?
however you want to take it. Okay? If you multiply 253 beds by 3 meals a day,
Okay, why don't you, okay, I think you need to testify. You're still under oath from the last time.
Right.
And whatever you're stating is your personal testimony. As
Correct.
long as it's brief, I think we should accept it in that manner.
We have the 3 minutes, okay, Mr. Falvo?
that's fine.
Okay.
All right, you have 253 beds times 3 meals a day. Comes out to 21,252 meals per month. That doesn't include snacks or anything else. The laundry, as was testified to by the operations person, if you take 2 sheets, 2 pillowcases per day, that comes out to somewhere in the area of 18,000 loads per month. Plus, he testified they would do personal laundry as well. So you have to take into account the number of vehicles that it requires to service that. The other point is the traffic expert testified, Mr. Ray, that when he took his line of sight measurements, he took them from the existing gate location. The plans submitted by the applicant show the relocation of the plans inward on Cedar Village Boulevard, so that as you approach the new gates, the gatehouse blocks your view of any vehicles making a left turn into Arbor Drive. I rest my case. And that violates DOT requirements for distance, sight distances at intersections. Thank you.
Okay. Jim Hicks, if you can state your name, your address, and if you affirm to tell the truth. You're muted.
Muted.
Okay, hello, my name is Jim Hicks. I'm the manager of Nobility Crest at Ocean. We actually have about 10 or 15 residents in our clubhouse, and some of them would like to speak if that's appropriate with the board.
If they can each individually state their name, their address, and if they affirm to tell the truth.
They will, thank you.
Hi, my name is Kathy Kelsey. I live at Nobility Crest, Unit 2103, and I affirm to tell the truth. I want to start out by thanking the ladies and gentlemen of the board for taking the time over these past many months to hear this proposal. Speaking as an owner of Nobility Crest, I ask you to please consider the impact of this construction to both Nobility Crest and Cedar Village. When we first heard of this proposed plan, our board, which included myself, met with Mr. Donner and Mr. Gohar, along with their engineer. During that meeting, we asked many questions, and one was how long they anticipated the construction to take. We were told at that meeting 4 to 5 years, not the 2-year construction year project that we have heard in these hearings. At the same meeting, Mr. Gohart asked us 3 different times, and I quote, "What will it take to make you happy?" 3 different times, no one answered him. There is currently testimony from these hearings that both Cedar Village and Nobility Crest accepted incentive from Mr. Gohart. Please realize this is not the case with regard to Nobility Crest. Can you imagine living here and hearing 60 dump trucks every day for 5 to 6 months just to remove a hill of dirt that is required? But it doesn't end there. Then comes the excavators, loaders, graders, etc., followed by the concrete trucks. And then comes steel, lumber, and roofing trucks. There could also be the need for pilings. We haven't even heard about that yet, which could bring in a pile driver. Not many people would think this is a great way to live for 5 years, particularly seniors who have selected this community to live out this phase of their lives in peace and quiet. The impact to our lives will be great. I don't see the condos that facing the construction site opening their windows or sliders for many, many beautiful spring and summer months due to the noise and the dirt. No sitting out on their decks or patios. 3 of our buildings are new construction, which have not even settled yet. The damage to their foundations and therefore probably also interior condo walls could negatively impact the lives of the owners for additional years of repairs after Arbor Manor is completed. I therefore ask on behalf of more than 500 residents in both communities to vote down this project and protect all of us under the master plan. Thank you for listening in your time. Respectfully submitted. Thank you.
I believe there are others in the room, so if the next person will just follow after each person, state your name, your address, and if you affirm to tell the truth, and you can just go one after the next.
That would be the last person. I would like to thank you for indulging us with that. Thank you. I'll lower my hand now.
Okay, and I believe Nancy spoke in the hand is just still,
No, I didn't.
no?
I'm a different Nancy.
There's two Nancys. Okay. If you can state your name, your address, and if you affirm to tell the truth.
Yes, my name is Nancy Lilly. I live on 9 Fernwood Drive, and I affirm to tell the truth. My husband and I moved in just in November. This is the first we've heard of this project. I just want to add a comment about the traffic, the 2 accidents that another resident just brought up. An email went out from Cedar Village, just suggesting that when we cross over 66 turning right or left, that we just take a little extra time to make sure no one is running those lights, running them, the red lights, so that to avoid an accident. And again, if there's more traffic, this is very disheartening to hear about this project, especially the last speaker. We knew nothing of the scope of this project, and quite frankly, we're very upset that anything like this might have been considered, and we really hope the board will do the right thing and vote this down so that our property values aren't impacted and our quality of, but most of all, our quality of life for the next 4 or 5 years will be negatively impacted. This isn't what we thought we were buying into, and we hope the board will recognize that and do the right thing.
Okay, I do not see any other hands raised. Are there any other comments from the public? Are there any other comments from the public? Okay, this is the last call. Are there any other comments from the public? Okay, if there's a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Okay, Amy, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Manel,
Yes.
Mr. Van Wagner,
Yes.
Mr. Ashkenazi,
Yes.
Mr. Mamie,
Yes.
Mrs. Talarico,
Yes.
Mr. DeGennaro,
Yes.
Mr. Puglielli,
Yes.
and Madam Chair.
Yes, and did we get Mr. Van Wagner?
Yes, I said yes.
Okay, for the next, for the actual voting, Amy, we only call 7 names. Okay, and that would be in, we would do first our members and then the alternates.
Okay.
I'm not sure that, I don't have in front of me the capacities of the 8 people who are here, but someone must be low on the totem pole. I'm not sure who that is. And if we go to a vote tonight, and I assume somebody will make a motion, only the first 7 get called.
Okay.
Okay, Amy? All right. To close the public hearing, of course, it's 7 or 8, doesn't really matter so much. I think at this point, it's summation time, and I believe that would be Mr. Gazarovski to go first.
I'm here. Thank you. Mr. Sandberg, before we start our summations, is the board going to place a time limit with regard to that? I would be in favor of having a definitive number of minutes. I think it's got to be more than 3. But, I think that we could present our case, argue it within.
Well, listen,
10 to 15
it's
minutes.
only you and Mr. Donner.
Right.
And again, I don't want to limit your time because you represent a lot of people, nor do I want to limit or I wouldn't suggest the board limit Mr. Donner's time because he has representing the applicant, and we've never done that. We do it for the public because they're not represented by counsel and they have a right to speak, but if we give them a block of time in which to do so, it just goes more smoothly, and we've been permitted to do that by the courts. I wouldn't give you a limit, and I wouldn't give Mr. Donner a limit. I just think you should just go forward.
Fine. We're all set?
I am.
Okay. I hope I am as well. Members of the board, also members of the public. My name is Ron Gazarovski. I'm an attorney with offices in Red Bank. I was in fact retained by the board of Nobility Crest to represent the interests of Nobility Crest as it concerns this application. I want to first thank Mr. Kirk, who's been a gentleman throughout this proceeding, and I think that he calls it right down the middle and hasn't played any favorites, and he did a good job, and I think the board should be proud of him. Secondly, I'd like to extend my good wishes to all of the members of Cedar Village as well as Nobility Crest who spoke. And I've been doing this for a long, long time, and I could say truthfully that I've never been involved in an application where there was such cogent and thoughtful comments made by the residents of Nobility Crest. And I think they were well called for. Everyone who spoke was a gentleman or gentlelady about it. And I just want to note that I am not going to be repetitive with regard to the comments that they made. It's obvious that for those of us, or those of you who live in Nobility Crest, there are tens of thousands of people who live in Ocean Township. Ocean Township has a representative form of government, and when we're focusing on the subject matter of this application, I think we have to remember that a variance is secured by reason of an appearance and vote of 5 members in the Zoning Board of Adjustment. That is unlike the manner in which the governing body itself created this zone. There was a point in time in New Jersey when municipal bodies did not have zoning ordinances. That is no longer the case in Ocean Township, and there's a process that people go through to determine how and where a particular parcel of land should be zoned and or rezoned. I think we also have to acknowledge the fact that my friend and colleague, Mr. Donner, had ample opportunity by giving perhaps advice to his client that rather than coming before a zoning board, that they approach and request a hearing before the governing body with regard to the rezoning of this property. And I have to emphasize that appearances here today before this board, this is really not rezoning. This is an application to permit what was previously a prohibited use and have this board grant a use variance so that this building can be structured. Only a governing body has the power to legislate. This body of articulate people does not have that power, so therefore you have to work within certain parameters. What the governing body did do, they placed this property in what is called the 01-20 zone, which does not permit this type of use. As a matter of fact, it's prohibited. So I think one of the starting points, which was covered by the residents, but I'd like to go into it once again, is that governing bodies create ordinances, and what they also do in periodic periods of time, they create a master plan and sets forth the goals of the municipality. On page 7 of the master plan, it sets forth the goals and objectives of the land use element, which is 1, ensure that land provides a balance of uses to help maintain that quality of life. I would submit that the governing body did in fact zone this property as well as other properties, setting forth how it could be utilized without having to go for a use variance. Secondly, the board has to ensure that the application as such protects environmentally sensitive areas such as wetlands and steep slopes. And one of the issues in this case was the representation that the existing elevation of a certain part of the property would be reduced in size because it appeared to be an artificially created mounding of dirt. It should also point out when that was being done, it was being placed upon the property with the acquiescence and consent of the then owners of the property. So what we're doing is we once create a mound to perhaps give some topographical added to the mix. Now the applicant is saying, well, I'm going to remove that mound, which has significant elevation. And so therefore he's really building a 4-story building, and perhaps 3 of them would be above what is now the existing grave. The applicant's planner testified, and she was a lovely planner, but I would submit that what she never said to the board, that the purpose of creating a zone and the purpose of having re-examination reports, and there were 15 re-examination reports after this master plan was passed, is to ensure that future development does not conflict with existing land use. And that's really prescient because we can see we have a master plan which prohibits the proposed use. Then I believe we have 15 re-examination plans going back in history. Not one of them ever speaks in terms of changing the zoning on this property so that a proposed use can be utilized. Also, I've been doing land use work for a very long period of time, and sometimes you win a case, other times you lose a case. But I'm always easily perhaps identified as an objector's attorney. What I want to say, and I think it's appropriate, is that this is not a case where residents are basically objecting. What they're really asking you to do is to look at and adopt and put into place the master plan and the re-examination of the master plans. I would submit to you respectfully that is the applicant who is really an objector in this case because he does not want to go along with what the existing ordinance says, despite the fact it's been considered multiple times. He is the one who is seeking unusual relief. And this isn't an application where someone is seeking to build a fence 10 feet high rather than 5 feet, or to change the height of the building or the types of materials and or the like. What this application is seeking to do is to create a whole new zone, which is contrary that what has been in place in this municipality perhaps 20 or 30 years. And I think that all of the residents who testified alluded to that, because all of them, I can't use the word all of them, but for example, members of Nobility Crest, Cedar Grove, they're talking about why they bought there, why they built there, the tranquility of the area. And also, I would submit in many, if not most cases, the unused parcel of land that was there would either not be utilized at all, or alternatively, it would be used and comport with what is the existing master plan with regard to the property. Now, I say that because governing bodies can in fact rezone if there's a discussion between the applicant or the owner. The governing body can take that into consideration, and they could not say grant relief of some sort from a zoning ordinance, but they would choose, or they could choose to place this into a zone for the type of use that the applicant is seeking. Now, I earlier pointed out we've had 15 re-examination reports since the master plan was first passed. 15. Not one of them even came close to granting the type of use which is proposed here. The applicant's planner, I would respectfully submit to you, was flawed. This particular planner was called to, I guess, evaluate this project at about the time that the application was presented to the board. So the owner of the property, the ultimate applicant or whatnot, he knew exactly what he wanted to do when he submitted this plan to the Zoning Board of Adjustment with regard to the relief which he is seeking. Well, his planner, whom supposedly he relied upon, was not called upon to be retained to prepare a report, do an evaluation prior to that time. So I would submit to you what she basically was done is some window dressing to make it sound acceptable. I would suggest to you that it was not acceptable, and her testimony did not go long into that. We now, look at what we have before us, and I think that everyone who testified, whether they were from Nobility Crest or the adjacent parcel, spoke about the impact that it would have upon their quality of life. Traffic, noise, things such as that, traffic safety, noise standards, and basically the complete destruction of a parcel of land that lies in between the two projects. Once again, a use variance does not create a new zone. A use variance provides some type of requested change in the zoning to suit the applicant or the developer. No one has given any testimony, nor has anyone come forward and said that this use variance should be granted because of the benefit is alleged to assert to the town. I think what is significant, and I think most significant, is that during the course of this application, I made a request for Mr. Gohar to testify. I did that because I saw his name on one of the application forms, and that request from me was denied. One has to ask why. Now, why would an applicant coming before this board with the dramatic use of the property and the dramatic impact it's going to have on the community, why would not the owner of this property, the members of this LLC that own it, why would they not come forward and not only give testimony, but also answer questions from the audience as to what qualifications they have or what knowledge they have to be able to run a facility such as this? There was a deathly silence from them, and I don't think that silence can be ignored. I think that silence has to be taken into consideration. Would this board consider giving a use variance to a much lesser application without knowing who the developer is or who the owner is or how he's going to run his business? Seemingly here, they're basically telling you, well, we don't have that information to give to you, but having said that, grant us the use variance that we want, and we'll figure it out after that. You have not been given an opportunity to pose questions to the owners of the property as to how they're going to utilize this facility. They just haven't. I think what was also significant in my mind is that the applicant continually spoke in terms of the need for this facility in this area and on this site. One would think that if that is one of the arguments, that they would be able to reach down and to members of the medical community who practice medicine in Ocean Township and have them give testimony as to their familiarity with this type of a project and their familiarity with whether or not such a project is needed at this particular location. None of that was done. Owners did not show up. Gohar does not show up. And they did that of their own wishes. They chose not to appear before you and say the true face of what this application is about. Secondly, with regard to physicians who were practicing in the area, one would think if there was a need such as this on this particular piece of property in this particular area, and listening to what they say they're going to have there, that the physician would say, well, I know these people, I've dealt with them in the past. They know what they're doing. They intend to do this. They intend to do that. Not one person with a medical background, well, I shouldn't use the word even because I consider nurses as important as doctors are. Not one came forward and said, this will be a blessing to us in treating the adult community of Ocean Township. I think that speaks volumes. That silence is deafening. That silence is so blatant because they're then saying to you as a board, even though we haven't produced any concrete data as to the need for this use on this particular piece of property, we want you to trust us so that sometime in the future, we don't know when, we're prepared to go forward and run this facility. I would submit to you, it's impossible for this board to grant relief with that absence of any testimony. So he hasn't produced the owner of the property. He hasn't produced the operator of the property. He really hasn't produced any engineering testimony to talk about what the change in grades and whatnot would cause to the surrounding property owners. I know that Nobility Crest has no objection to this property being developed. However, having said that, they are entitled to the protection of the governing body of this municipality to ensure that the zoning ordinance, which is presently in place, remains in place, and that we not go forward with an unknown factor. And basically, that is what I would like the board to focus on. Absence of testimony from the owners of the property, absence of a developer, absence of a person who runs facilities such as this and goes into detail as to each and every portion of the operation. So I would respectfully submit to you, I think what the applicant is looking for here is a gift. We're not going to explain anything that we're going to do. We're not going to talk in terms of staffing, nursing, and or the like. We simply want an approval so that we can proceed forward. They don't say they're going to proceed forward. Even when the expert who testified, who provided him with some information, when he testified, no one ever said to us, well, this is the person who is going to take over this facility and run it, so that you, the board, can ask him questions as to exactly how that will be done. This is really a pig in a poke. Rezone it, allow us to utilize it to make money by selling it to some unknown developer, perhaps. And then all of those problems, if they exist, will be upon the community at large. I mean, respectfully, this board is made up of 7 people. And from the comments I've heard, they love living in Ocean Township, and they love that it's being run in a fashion to benefit the residents of the community. It may very well be that a presentation was made to the governing body. They might take into consideration rezoning the property. That wasn't done. Rather than listening to the wishes of thousands of people who live in Ocean Township, rather than listening to the thoughts of the governing body going back to the master plan and coming forward, this applicant is coming before you with what I would argue is a completely inadequate and incomplete application. And if he gets that stamp of approval, he's just going to jump up then and run around and market this piece of property. Marketing a piece of property to perhaps an owner who has this particular type of practice, all you have to do is come in and submit your architecturals because we have the approvals in place. That really is not what zoning is about. I think that zoning boards of adjustment serve important functions. I've certainly done that on many occasions myself, but they are asking, the relief they're asking for, and for you to grant, is directly contrary to the master plan and to the reexamination plans. Contrary to what the duly elected body of the community has determined is appropriate from this property. And I am not in any way saying that in a derogatory fashion with regard to this board. I think it's wonderful when people volunteer their times after they go to work or take care of.
I think he's frozen. I think he's frozen.
But he did a good job. He's really good.
Mr. Gazarovski? Mr. Gazarovski, if you can hear me, you're frozen, I believe.
I had to mute.
I'm going to try to reach out to Mr. Gazarovski by phone.
We can.
Amy, can you please mute everyone else?
And that's
I just spoke to him. His computer is malfunctioning.
Okay, Ron, it's Ron Kirk. We're trying to get you back online. I'm calling you on my phone, so I can't tell you that's going to help you for the meeting. At this point, on the meeting, no. On the phone, yes.
Yeah, let him call in then, Ron. Okay, and finish.
Yes, certainly. You certainly can have your remarks telephonically.
Fine.
Okay.
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Can you hear now?
There we go.
Well, I'm his tech.
There we go, Ron.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. He's on.
Okay.
You never trust an old man with a computer, I guess, right? Having said that, as we left off, I would simply, in conclusion, say that clearly this project is simply so overwhelming and so large that it's going to have a total negative effect about all of those people who reside in Nobility Crest and the adjacent project as well. I have not heard one word from any resident who lives either in Nobility Crest or Sear come out speaking affirmatively about this project. Absolutely nothing. I would, in my concluding remarks, just simply ask the board to look at the expert witnesses presented by the applicant, listen more closely or just as closely to the many residents who spoke in opposition to the project. Planners and attorneys are, not to say it disrespectfully of myself, they're paid mouthpieces. I don't live in Nobility Crest and I don't live in the adjacent parcel, nor do I believe Mr. Donner does. Having said that, you had appeared before you, I would say between 30 and 50 people who are on the ground. They live there and they're telling you what their fear is with regard to the quality of life if this application is approved. I thank the board for its patience in listening to me, and I guess we could proceed from here.
I believe it's Mr. Donner.
Mr. Donner, you're muted.
Could I request a 3 or 4 minute recess just to gather myself?
Yes, I have 7:56. Let's come back at 8 o'clock. Okay, I have 8 o'clock. Amy, if we can please have a roll call.
Mr. Fuller, Mr. DeLumo, Mr. Manel,
Hey, Ali.
Mr. Van Wagner, Mr. Ashkenazi,
Here.
Mr. Mamie,
Here.
Mrs. Talarico,
Here.
Mr. DeGenaro,
Here.
Mr. Puglielli,
Here.
Madam Chair.
Here.
I'm
Okay,
here.
Mr.
I'm here as
Yeah,
well.
Manel is here too.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Donner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I proceed?
Yes, please.
Thank you so much. This is almost the 5th year of the planning and presentation of this project. This is not an overnight endeavor. It began with us meeting almost 5 years ago with the town fathers in a conceptual meeting, at which time we asked the town fathers, as we presented this concept, whether they would prefer us to move forward with the rezoning or to seek a use variance. And the consensus at that meeting was they preferred a use variance as opposed to a rezoning, which they felt was not necessary. A rezoning is not a mandatory alternative to a use variance. Beyond that, I've heard a number of people speak tonight about their concerns regarding our project. Just about all of the concerns they raised had to deal with whether or not their final years or their lifestyle or their enjoyment of their property would be disrupted. And those who gave other statistics gave them without any background, any source cited, or any statement as to their qualifications to even give these type of credentials. So I can't, in my mind, in good faith, accept any of those representations about how many decibels a bulldozer makes or a truck makes, or whether or not assisted living and long-term care and rehabilitation and memory care are a decreasing use because somebody read an article. I prefer to rely on the case that we presented. And we presented a magnificent case with all sorts of highly credible people giving their testimony and citing examples and exhibits that they prepared under oath. I am not so jaded as to believe that attorneys only do what they do to get a paycheck. I'm not so jaded to believe that a man like John Ray, who's a traffic engineer with a reputation in this area that must be preserved to earn his living, is going to prostitute himself or give false testimony or to say something that he does not believe in with the application of his expertise. I don't believe that Phil Scalo, who is the vice chairman, Mr. Ray was our traffic engineer. I don't believe that Phil Scalo, who is our facility expert, the vice chairman of a 15,000 member group of facilities like we are proposing nationwide and owns 6 of these facilities that provide the kind of care that we're proposing: assisted living, long-term care, rehabilitation, and memory care. I don't believe that he would come in and make up something to damage his reputation either. In fact, we presented a professional engineer, Nelson Engineer. We presented an accredited architect, Wayne Lehrman, Mr. Ray, our traffic engineer, Mr. Scalo, our facilities expert, Barbara Allen, our planner, Mike Francis, a PhD in environmental studies and matters, to talk about our wetland general permit, Julia Vyuk from London to put together with an established team of architects, engineers, animators, and computer specialists to demonstrate, because the board wanted to know what this project would look like if in fact it was actually built, and how high would it seem versus the 3 buildings that are closest to it at Nobility Crest. We saw that they would be on an approximate even level, and how our facility would be perceived from different places in the surrounding areas. From Nobility Crest and those 3 buildings, we saw they'd be looking at a dense forest. They couldn't even see our building. And from Cedar Village, for the most part, our building was concealed by its differential in height, by the screening, and by whatever viewpoint we showed, whether it's up and down Cedar Village Boulevard or coming at Cedar Village, coming at our project from some of the side streets or moving parallel to our project was nearly invisible within the community. These are meaningful demonstrations of what our project is about. I want to start substantively to talk about what the essence of this project is. And we keep on throwing around the term inherently beneficial. We use it so much that maybe we don't really appreciate what it really means. Inherently beneficial is when a person who has lived a full life, and no matter how dynamic and physically capable and mentally alert they were, reach a stage in their life when they are no longer able to sufficiently care for themselves. They may not be able to fully dress themselves. They may not be able to keep tabs on their medications. They may just be so discouraged from a life that is consistently being narrowed around them that even when they live in their own home, some days they don't even get dressed. They stay in their bathroom. And I speak with some authority about this because I viewed all this with my own mother. And the fact that when she needed assisted living and rehabilitation, a 66-year resident in Ocean Township had to leave the township and go somewhere else to get that care. Mr. Scalo talked about the need for the kind of care we are offering to provide. Based on his review of the township and the 16 other facilities that are in our general area, but outside the effective 5-mile to 7-mile market area. What he said was, we are experiencing a silver tsunami, that we have a population that is aging and continues to age and needs these services. Mr. Scalo has planned 6 of his own facilities. Mr. Scalo is exposed to all of the various studies regarding need and the growth of this industry on a nationwide basis. Mr. Scalo brought that expertise to this board to bring that information. Now, Mr. Gazarovski did cross-examine Mr. Scalo, and he asked him questions, and Mr. Scalo had an answer for every question that Mr. Gazarovski raised to him, fairly and respectfully, and he was able to maintain his original testimony because the testimony was true. Now, Mr. Gazarovski also cross-examined our planner, Barbara Allen, and she held up well as also. I'm going to get into some of the things that she said in a moment, but while Mr. Gazarovski had me keep all of my remaining witnesses standing by, including Ms. Vayak from London, no less, he didn't even bother to cross-examine any one of those. In fact, he closed his case. Let's talk about his case, because did Mr. Gazarovski bring a professional engineer? Did Mr. Gazarovski ask our engineer, Mr. Besh, any question whatsoever? Those answers are no. Did Mr. Gazarovski bring an architect to talk about the design of our building? Did he examine Mr. Lerman, who was with us on 2 separate meetings ready to be cross-examined and to be asked questions? The answer is no. Did he ask anything of Mr. Francis, Dr. Francis, regarding the wetlands that Mr. Gazarovski pretends to be concerned about with this application, where in fact, we are not really touching the wetlands. We are disturbing less than 1/4 of an acre. And Dr. Francis testified to us that we will absolutely qualify for a general permit for that disturbance, which is only temporary and which will be reconditioned and refurbished when the temporary construction access is no longer needed. These things are very telling because a person can say anything, but to get to this board, to understand what this project is really about and to give reliable information, that is something else. It is so easy to pull something down, to destroy a carefully worked edifice of fact and solid proposal. What's hard is putting it together, and that has taken years to do. The people who have come forward, and been about 16 tonight, the way I count, and probably about the same amount, maybe a little more last time. Some of them expressed the idea they wanted to have a peaceful and quiet end of their life, enjoying their facility, enjoying their unit. And I couldn't help but have two things come to mind. One thing that came to my mind is they are in that unit because somebody else put up with some level of inconvenience in order for their unit to be built. Whether it was the other people in Nobility Crest, whether there were surrounding homeowners on Freehold Road, the people that could hear what was going on the other side of Cedar Village Boulevard, on Dogwood and Sequoia, and those streets that are close by. I don't know. But in fact, somebody put up with that so that they would have the privilege of being in their home today. And the other thing, perhaps more importantly, that crossed my mind was that I don't think that they're looking at what really happens as one grows older in a realistic fashion. I say it very respectfully. If they feel they're going to finish out their closing years in their current home and maintain their ability to care for themselves in a substantial and sufficient way to the very end, that is contrary to everything that I have ever seen, and probably contrary to what you, the members of the board, have seen in your own lifetime experiences. There will come a time when these individuals, and in fact, all of us, will need the care that we're talking about. And when that care is available in this township, they will thank the good Lord above that someone had the tenacity, the perseverance, the courage, the ability to stand in and present a proposal like ours so that that care could in fact be delivered. And it's not about whether the owners are capable or not capable of running this facility, because for this facility to be run, and we've gone into great detail about this with Mr. Scalo, we will have to go through one of the most rigorous procedures in the country with the New Jersey Department of Health. If we don't have our facility on the inside, the footprint will stay the same, but on the inside, meet every specific that the Department of Health provides for. If we don't have the right personnel to do the various functions that are called for within a facility like ours, if we don't have the proper people to manage it and run it and be responsible for it, we will never get that facility open. And so we have to understand that there's a commitment here. There's a commitment to do this the right way. Mr. Scalo talked about it. He said very specifically he wouldn't be involved with this project if he didn't believe that the applicants had the ability to organize and have the right people in place and to meet the various requirements that will be imposed by the Department of Health. Now, when I talk about what we offer in assisted living or rehabilitation or long-term care or memory care. What I'm talking about is that we are offering the people that need to come to us life. We are talking about giving them the ability to go on, to have a meaningful life, to have friends, to have activities. The woman I talked about that wouldn't get out of her bathroom was my mother. She came to the assisted living facility and saw what was there, finally, because she was prejudiced about whether it was going to be a nursing home or something that she couldn't tolerate. When she saw what was there and handpicked the place that she wanted to be, she had a whole horizon, a whole world that opened up for her, that gave her life. From 92 to 96, my mother had a life because she was in a facility like the one that we are proposing. In fact, the woman that wouldn't get out of her bathrobe told my fiancée, Rosemary, don't buy me any clothes that you wouldn't wear yourself. She wore her makeup every day. She had her hair done every day properly. She was out and around, interrelating with people, living a life. We talk about respect for people. We talk about the need for everybody to be heard. We won't deny that respect to the last person who wants to say something. But what about giving people an opportunity for life when they would otherwise, without those opportunities, fall by the wayside? What about respect there? What are we talking about there? That's the inherent beneficial aspect of what this project is about and has always been about. And by the way, this is not just me, the attorney, talking. This is our courts talking. In 1990, in a case called Jaber versus Municipal Council of Township of West Orange, was a case where the Board of Adjustment gave a use variance for what they call the congregate senior facility, which is the outmoded term for assisted living. The Township Council negated it, reversed it, and then the court upheld the variance, finding that no significant depreciation or compromise of the present zone plan or any undermining of any legitimate zoning consideration would be present. The congregate care housing facility and the support services it provided were inherently beneficial in accordance with its special reason requirement for a use variance. The use was a special reason grounded in an inherently beneficial use that served the general welfare, and plaintiff was entitled to the variance. The other specific findings that were made by this court were the aging of the population and the special housing needs of the elderly, irrespective of their individual financial resources, creates significant social problems which government, as a matter of the general welfare, is obligated to address. All senior citizens in general need deserve the attention, assistance, and protection of the state. So how are we going to protect them? We protect them by far-reaching policies. We protect them by good decisions based on fact. And the government in this case, are you board members who are here as the leading edge. I remarked at the beginning of this application, many meetings ago, that the goal of the township is a community of gracious living. To be gracious, the community must care for everybody. And the way that everybody is cared for when they are senior citizens is to make sure that the facilities that they need to properly live are available. Now, in the Sika case, the court set forward a procedure on how the use variances are to be determined. First, you have to identify a public interest at stake. And the public interest, as I've noted, is life. Life for our senior citizens, a life that they would not be able to maintain on their own. The second idea, or the second factor, is to look at what detrimental effects will ensue from the grant of the variance. Let's talk about detrimental effects here, because I can't really identify any significant detrimental effect. When we first met with the town fathers and talked about the concept of this proposal, we were urged to go from a 3-story consideration to 4 stories because the town fathers and their professionals were concerned in this specific instance about creating too much impervious coverage. They recognized that the Cedar Village stormwater drainage system, which Nobility Crest had been allowed to tie into, was overwhelmed. And they did not want us to add to that problem if we could avoid it. Subsequently, we learned, as we again got more involved and did more research with the project, we learned that going to 4 stories made a lot of sense because it cut down on how much screening we would otherwise have to take out. Because if we couldn't go up, we would have to go out. We would have to go wide. And that would take away the screening on both our west and east sides of this project. And then finally, we learned that we needed to cut down the distance between the units of bed facilities for our residents and where they would go every day for meals, physical therapy, and the other services that they needed, including nursing supervision and their medications to be administered to them. And when they have to move several times a day, we have to lessen that distance. By going up and not going wide, we have, in fact, lessened that distance. And it's been very important. So what might look as a detriment because we're a 4-story building instead of a 3-story building has turned out to be a benefit. On our west side of our project, we are more than 300 feet. I'm talking about the building envelope. We are more than 300 feet from those 3 buildings at Nobility Crest. And on the east side of our project, from that temporary construction access, we are 271 feet from the center of that access to the center of Cedar Village Boulevard. Now, how did we get there? We, after meeting conceptually with the town fathers, we sent out our plans to both Cedar Village and to Nobility Crest. Cedar Village took us up on our offer to come and present our project and have all of our experts there to lay out everything we were going to do at that time. And we learned from Cedar Village that they were concerned about their stormwater drainage system, and they were concerned about the use of Cedar Village Boulevard. And we, in reaction or taking into consideration what their concerns were, changed our entire stormwater drainage system so that it would not drain towards the Cedar Village and Nobility Crest facility. We would not have a surface detention basin. We would put everything underground into massive caverns under the ground where it would be stored and released slowly, ultimately out to Route 66. That change in and of itself was a massive public service and a costly one at that. Probably added $1 million to the cost of this project, but we did it because we wanted to be helpful. We didn't want to be a detriment to Cedar Village or anybody else. We also took into account what they had to say about not utilizing Cedar Village Boulevard for any of our construction traffic. And we then elected to use Freehold Road. However, although Nobility Crest originally told us they did not want us to present our project to them, that they were going to rely on Cedar Village, late in the situation, they asked us to come in and we met with their board and we learned of their concerns. Their concerns at that time were that they were concerned about whether or not our building would somehow block their view or be oppressive in sight to them. And they were concerned about Freehold Road. They did not want Freehold Road to be used for construction purposes when we have these 3 new buildings that are relatively adjacent to Freehold Road. So what did we do? We said that Freehold Road was not going to be used for any purpose other than an emergency access way. And what we did was devise a temporary construction access down the middle to the slightly right side of our property directly to Route 66. Now, it's very interesting because that temporary construction access is less than a 4-degree grade at the surface at 66. It's less than 5 degrees going up. It becomes about 10 degrees and it never goes more than 10 degrees. And then it joins our driveway, which is 7 degrees of elevation. 7 degrees of elevation is essentially what a handicapped ramp has. So, well, people are concerned about whether or not our driveway up to our project from Cedar Village Road or Boulevard will be safe or not, I can tell them that it has an elevation of less than a handicap ramp. Highways, federal highways, are able to have an elevation as much as 15 degrees. We are less than half of that. And we did that deliberately. Our grading was set up to accomplish that very fact. Now, the third thing that we do when we look at the use variance is to see if there's any kind of detrimental effect that may be reduced by some kind of a reasonable condition. We've already talked about using only certain hours of the day in order to do the excavation that's needed to be done. And by the way, that excavation is not singular to this project. That excavation would be needed whether any project would be necessary to be built on that site. And in fact, while people have also talked about the master plan, I thought it was interesting to note that in the 2004 re-examination of the master plan, where Mr. Higgins specifically discussed block 149.01, lot 101, our property, he found that if the site were developed for single-family, age-restricted housing, access could be provided at the northern end of the site in an integrated fashion with Cedar Village streets. That was to eliminate the concern of the 14% slope that he thought would have to be used at that point in time. But he was still willing to have the project of planned adult community single-family units integrate with the streets in Nobility Crest and Cedar Village in order to have that project avoid the steeper grade. But then he did say also the maximum number of units permitted in the planned adult community would be increased in this formulation from the current 300 to 345. So what I'm trying to point out is that under the master plan, it has considered alternate uses for this property. Among those uses was a planned adult community having many, many more units and many more people than we're talking about. In fact, we are talking about probably one of the lightest uses that can be imagined because the people that will be with us don't drive. We have a limited employee staff, never more than 90. During the late afternoon, it's down to 45. During the evening, it's down to 30. And the shifts we have demonstrated are not in sequence with the peak hours on Cedar Village Boulevard or Highway 66. They're at different times. And Mr. Rea, in his report, by the way, never talked about 30 seconds or 10 seconds or anything like that regarding how long the traffic signal was going to be at Cedar Village Boulevard and Route 66. What he said was that levels of service range from A to F, with A being the highest or best attainable level of service. Level of service E with average control delays of not more than 50 seconds per vehicle at an unsignalized intersection. That would be like our driveway with Cedar Village Boulevard, or 80 seconds per vehicle at a signalized intersection indicates near to or at capacity conditions and is generally considered the limit of acceptable level of service and delay. But however, he found that in the AM peak hour at Cedar Village Boulevard and Route 66, the service level was A. In the PM peak hour, the service level was B. There was no 10 seconds or 30 seconds or anything like that, that he was timing the signal to come to this conclusion. He came to this conclusion by going out there and counting the cars and using data from highly populated summers, as well as present data, as well as following up later on. And he also, in a subsequent report, took a look at the entire traffic system on Cedar Village Boulevard, specifically the sight distance from the top of Cedar Village Boulevard coming down to our driveway, and found that because the system that we were setting up and was really already in place allows only one car at a time to pass that gate, that there is more than enough sight distance and more than enough time for that downward exit to be safely used. Now, Mr. Gazarovski could have cross-examined Mr. Ray about this. He could have brought in his own traffic engineer, but he did not. This is the data that the board has about the safety of Cedar Village Boulevard and the service level of Cedar Village Boulevard with Route 66, as well as the safety coming down the hill, coming towards our driveway, going to Route 66. All of this is uncontroverted because nobody was able to either cross-examine our witness or produce a witness of their own. The last thing that the Sika case talks about is the board should then weigh the positive and negative criteria and determine whether on balance, the grant of the variance would cause a substantial detriment to the public good. Now, because we're inherently beneficial, and by the way, the Japer case found that we were, and the Sika case cites congregant senior facilities as being inherently beneficial, we are assumed to have positive criteria. So we look at the negative criteria. Well, what are the negative criteria? Height is not a negative criteria because we are storing our building at a finished floor level of 110, whereas the three buildings at at Nobility Crest start at a finished floor level of 131. So even though we're a 4-story building and they're a 3-story building, when you look at the horizon, as Ms. Vayek's videotape demonstrated, these buildings look to be comparable in height. And our building does not dominate the surrounding area. In fact, it is difficult to see, as that video demonstrated. What else? The fact that we are, going to have to do some excavation on the site. The fact that we have a temporary construction access that's 271 feet away from Cedar Village and over 300 feet from Nobility Crest. Is that a negative criteria or a negative aspect? Where is the demonstration of smell, of noise, of noxious air, of anything that was brought up by the people that objected in their statements? There's nothing there to back it up. In fact, we talked about it in our testimony. Mr. Besh, our engineer, talked about that, okay? And he talked about the fact that these trucks were going to be paced, they're going to be used during the heart of the day for a number of hours that would not interfere with the morning activities or the evening activities of the surrounding areas, that they were 300 feet plus or more than 270 feet plus from each of these surrounding communities, and nothing that was going to be going on was going to be impacting these communities. They are insulated by forest, they're insulated by height, they're insulated by screening. There's no evidence that we're going to have smells or noise or any of that. There's no evidence that our garbage pickup is going to happen every day. In fact, it happens once or twice per week. And there's nothing to demonstrate that any of the things that these people, and I respect them as residents who I've tried to please, who the applicant has tried to please, that any of their fears are really grounded in fact. If in fact, when we compare the positive criteria of the inherently beneficial use with the minimal negative criteria, if any, that we are talking about, there is simply no substantial detriment to the public good. And in fact, while Mr. Gazarovski talks about the use being prohibited, that's not really quite correct. The use that we're talking about was simply not provided for. There was never a decision not to have it. It was never considered at all. The only facility in Ocean Township that has anything like we're proposing to offer is the facility that has 16 beds for memory care and Wayside. That's the only facility, and it's full. It's full. When Mr. Higgins needed this service for his own wife, he too had to leave Ocean Township, and he was very gracious in sharing that observation with us. None of the facilities that are in the neighboring communities, more than the 5 to 7 mile market area, offer all 4 of the services that we're talking about. They either just offer assisted living, or maybe some rehabilitation, or maybe just long-term care. We offer all 4. And why is this important? Because people that are in this facility need other care sometimes beyond assisted living. Where there's a surgery and a need for rehabilitation, once you leave the hospital and you're no longer an acute patient, you need to go somewhere. And in the case of my mother, she was able to go to the facility that we had for her in Jackson, where she had her assisted living unit, but also a rehabilitation facility right on the same campus. And she was being cared by essentially the same people in a community to which she belonged. That is important. And for people to be visited by their family, and for people to have any chance of having attendance by relatives at the various events and things that are provided, you need to be within that 5 to 7 mile area, because otherwise it's just too far. It's too far and people are not able to regularly appear. The community that we're talking about is going to be a beautiful community. And Mr. Lehrman's plans demonstrate that. And it's going to be made even better when BoA takes a look at it and brings the true efficiencies in. But our footprint is going to be what is shown. Our aisles are wide enough to meet all of the requirements. And we're going to have, in addition to rooms that belong to each individual with their own bed, their own decorations, their own ability to be as independent as they can possibly be, they're going to be backed up with assistance to the extent they need it in dressing, in medications, in physical therapy, in whatever supervision they need, and events, lectures, entertainment, libraries, movies, all of the things that make a difference in people's lives, plus an outside area where they can lounge and be. Some of the people that are in assisted living will have memory care issues. And when they get to a point where they need acute memory care assistance, they will have their own separate unit that makes sure they're safe, makes sure they're properly supervised and cared for. When people no longer have the ability to be independent enough to be in assisted living, they will be in long-term care in the same facility. And when they need the help of recovering from a surgery or recovering from an accident, they will have the rehabilitation facility as well. We are the only facility that's talking about doing all of those things, and all of them are extremely important. You know, we've had a number of people that showed up at our last meeting and this meeting who were expressing concerns about our project. In essence, we're talking about approximately 40, maybe 45 people out of hundreds of people that are at Cedar Village and in Nobility Crest. And by the way, when we had that meeting with the Nobility Crest board, nobody said it was going to take 4 or 5 years to construct its facility. What we may have said was it's going to take several years to get through both our local approvals and our Department of Health approvals. But once we get under construction, we're talking about a year or a little more, and that's it. Nobody ever said 4 to 5 years. And when we asked the board what we could do for them to make our project more acceptable, they didn't really say anything other than the fact they were concerned about Freehold Road, which has now been eliminated, and they were concerned about the view regarding our building, which we, I think, demonstrated is not a concern. We would have assisted them with something, like we are assisting Cedar Village. We are assisting Cedar Village with a brand new gatehouse, with new gates, with new cameras, with a new system to come in because they've experienced a lot of delays and backup because they didn't have people at that gate. The gatehouse that we're going to build for them, it's going to have a toilet. It's going to have HVAC. It's going to be able to be occupied by a real person who has the ability to let people in when you're a visitor. And of course, the residents now have the fob where the gate goes up. That will be a much better situation. We're going to have our entrance signage be uniform with theirs and upgrade everybody's entrance signage. We're going to generally improve the entire entrance and exit to and from Cedar Village and Nobility Crest. And our site plan sets forth those details. In fact, Cedar Village felt that our contribution was so important that they engaged in a settlement with us in which they, in writing, have supported this project. That's why their attorney hasn't been there. That's why they've had no objecting status to what our application was all about. The fact that we have 45 people voicing concerns, I think a louder message is that we have hundreds of people that are apparently satisfied with what we're doing and have stayed back and allowed themselves to just enjoy their lives, anticipating what we have promised to do and will do if we are approved. So I don't want to take too much longer, and I thank you for your patience. If I neglected to thank the board for its tremendous dedication and its ability and willingness to go through all these meetings. This is our 6th special meeting in order to get this project considered. I'm deeply grateful for that. I'm also grateful for the fact that we've had people come out and give their opinions. And in considering what they said, we either have been able to verify that we're on the right track, or we have considered things that we should have done, and in some instances have done, such as the temporary construction access, which I think makes a world of difference. On this basis, I will venture to say that our project is one of the most complete, one of the most carefully planned, and one of the most difficult and ambitious projects that I've been involved in. But it's there for a reason that is essential. It's essential to the welfare of our community. And frankly, none of the people that I recall that have spoken with their opinion, either tonight, or the meeting before, or even when they were asking questions, really got into or talked about this balance between what the community needs and what they were concerned about. It was always their concerns, not what the community needed. And what the community needs is clear. It's clear in the law, and it's clear in the testimony that you've been given. And on that basis, I am asking each of you to favorably consider our use variance and to favorably consider our preliminary and final site plan approval application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Donner and Mr. Steinberg.
It's now time for the board, acting as the trier of fact, basically, to make a decision and determination based upon the evidence then presented by the applicant, as well as those professionals brought on behalf of the objectors and the objectors themselves. Basically, we have a situation primarily that the applicant is requesting what we call a D1 use variance. We have a proscriptive zoning ordinance, which means that if it's not stated as permitted, it is not permitted. And this specific use is not permitted in this zone. We have a master plan that reviewed this specific piece of property over many different iterations. Mr. Higgins advised that the last time this was addressed, the application was for a different type of use, but at a higher elevation. And all those elevations came into play when the master plan was revised in, I believe, 2004. So that this is under the master plan was not even considered as a possible use, which would have amended the ordinance. Given that fact, we do have
Mark, can I just
case law. Yes, yes, that's Mr. Higgins himself speaking. Yes.
2004, the reexamination was actually for a development that it was at a lower elevation than what is proposed here. What is being proposed here, if you look at the top of the building, it's probably 25 feet higher than would have been constructed under that request in 2004. And that request really, the thrust of the denial of that request was the height of the building and the visual impact.
So, and then the master plan kept this property as being prohibited from that type of use.
Yes.
Or any other of these uses. Yeah.
yes.
So buildings were considered at different heights, even lower height on this building, and the master plan remained as it was.
Yes.
Okay. So past that, now it comes the applicant's burden by case law to present you a case as to why you should be granting, firstly, a D1 use variance. I would submit that both case law and Mr. Donner and Mr. Higgins in his report submit to you that the proposed use is what they consider to be an inherently beneficial use. Schools, churches, hospitals, this type of facility are all considered to be inherently beneficial to the society at large, not just to the members of Ocean Township. And it makes the use itself go over one hurdle forward. There's a case in which, very similar case, the Sika case, where there was going to be a medical facility. And again, it was a prohibited use, but because of what it was going to be, the courts have determined that these inherently beneficial uses need to be given preference when you get a D1 variance. To counteract that, the courts have indicated that the board needs to then weigh, firstly, whether or not, although it's inherently beneficial, are there substantial detriments caused by the development as proposed, which would outweigh the inherently beneficial use that's proposed? That's where you come into play. You have to make that decision. In Jim's report, as was given to you, he questions the need, the magnitude of the need for this type of facility, based upon there's not been a certificate of need, there hasn't been a state license, and I think there's been some substantial development in the area of similar facilities. I don't know if that came up in testimony or not, but I understand, I don't give testimony, but there's I believe Tin Falls has recently approved a similar project. Are you aware of that, Mr. Higgins?
Tinton Falls hasn't, but Eatontown has.
Oh,
right
Eatontown.
outside of Monmouth Mall, and it's under construction. It's 179 units. And just the other thing is that there was just no study presented that said, here is what the need is, here's what the magnitude of the need is, and the magnitude of the benefit, to weigh it against any possible detriments. And that's something the board should look at and consider. Mr. Scalo testified that he felt there was a need, but there was no study done. And he also talked about no facilities within 5 to 7 miles of the subject site, but only outside 7 miles of the subject site. And there are facilities within 7 miles of the subject site to provide assisted living and memory care. So the board needs to.
Maybe not all four. I don't know about all four.
Maybe not all 4 of those, no.
Right.
But the board needs to look at that to determine the magnitude of the benefit and then weigh that against the detriments.
The detriments discussed, and the detriments have been presented. There's a secondary D variance for the height, which does not come under Sika, which is an interesting fact, because although a use variance or a D variance should be inclusive of all other variances required, I'm not sure that includes the height variance.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Because that's a second D variance.
And a related issue is that the municipal land use law, subsequent to the Sika decision, came up with a requirement, and let me just read what it says. It says, no variance or relief may be granted under the terms of this section, which is the section that allows you to grant a D1 variance, including a variance or other relief involving an inherently beneficial use, without a showing that such variance or relief can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and will not substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan and zoning ordinance. And the reexamination report in 2004, which is part of your zone plan, recommends specifically that a high building, a three-story building with a base elevation of 95 feet is not appropriate to be constructed on this site. What's being proposed here is a four-story building, or even if it was a three-story building, but the base elevation is 110 feet, which is 15 feet higher. So if you take a four-story building to add that 15 feet plus another 10 feet for the fourth story, it's about 25 feet higher than what was considered by the reexamination report at that point in time.
But weren't you worried about the 14% elevation on the driveway?
Whoa, 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 whoa.
No, that is not what I'm discussing right now, Jeff. I'm discussing the height issue. And the height issue.
It's a separate variance. It's not within the use.
That's correct. That's correct. And just one other thing, just to correct the record, is, and I think Jeff Donner misread the examination report when he was talking about there's 45. It said if you could develop this site for single-family housing, you could get an additional 45 units on it, which would total 345 units. And Mr. Donner made a comment that that's a lot more than what's being proposed here. But the point is the 300 units that were, if the 45 was added to, those 300 units was the existing Cedar Village. So it would have only been 45 more units, which is a lot fewer even in terms of beds than what's being proposed here. So these are things for the board to consider. I don't want to give testimony. I'm not giving opinion. I'm just stating facts here for the board to consider.
So basically, we know it's an inherently beneficial use. I believe that's a given. The real question is whether or not the detriments outweigh the benefits, because there certainly is a benefit to this type of facility, if not here, someplace within the community at large, which is the greater community other than Ocean Township, can be in the surrounding communities. So the board has to decide whether or not they feel from the testimony that's been presented by the objectors, whether they feel from their own knowledge, which the courts have always permitted the personal experience of the board members knowing the township, whether or not there would be substantial detriment. And I believe most of that was discussed as to traffic safety, noise, odors, light, air, open space, visual impact, that's the height, stormwater management impacts, and the environmental concerns. So the board has to decide whether or not those items can be considered as substantially detrimental. Number one. Number two, whether or not what the applicant has presented, and the applicant has done some changes as this application has proceeded, have mitigated some of those situations. Certainly the applicant has changed the access. It's going to work out different things for not using Freehold Road, screening the site, etc. Whether or not there's enough of that would mitigate the substantial detriment if the board finds substantial detriment. And basically the board has to balance. They have to decide whether or not this facility and its importance and its need outweighs any of the substantial detriments that have been expressed and have been indicated by both some of our professional reports and by the objectors, professionals, as well as the objectors themselves. I think that the height is a whole separate thing in another issue, but since we're taking this as a whole, we're taking this as a D variance D1, which is the use, and those, the D and the 1, those are the suffixes basically of the statutes where these types of variances are outlined. A D1 is a use variance. It's a D6 is the height?
That's correct.
Yeah, the D6 is the height when anything exceeds 10% of what is permitted. There's really actually nothing permitted because this building does not have it's not a permitted use and it doesn't have bulk parameters. But we do have a maximum height in town, don't we?
Yeah, I think For any building, I think it's 45 feet, but I'm not 100% sure.
And this building will be, I forgot,
A little
54.
over 50, I believe.
54.
54.
Mhm.
So I'm, whether or not that needs that variance or not, that I don't know, but there is no parameters for this because we don't have this use specified in this zone.
Mhm.
So we take it as a whole, the use variance. So as a whole, the board has to decide whether or not A, they meet the use variance criteria of the D1 and overcome the substantial detriments caused by the development. Number two, the height. Number three, the soil removal. That's usually a general bulk variance that we have. There's a lot of soil removal here, which it's a bulk variance inclusive. The parking space sizes and the number of parking spaces. The applicant says what he's providing is sufficient. That's another thing that the board has to consider. So as a whole, the board needs to decide, do the detriments outweigh the benefits? I don't know if any board members have any questions, either me or Jim, as to not the specific facts, but as to what you have to be looking for. And if not, someone needs to make a motion. And then, as I indicated to the board in past proceedings when they're this volatile, that when we do vote, we would ask the board members to give their reasons for their vote, one way or the other, of course.
Hey, Mark,
Shawanda?
I'm
Go ahead.
sorry. It's Rich.
No,
from
go ahead.
Raglan. I was just going to ask a question pursuant to your instruction there, if we had any. And I am prepared to make a motion, and before I did, I would explain my reasons, but I guess one thing I was gonna, it just went out of my head. So one other thing I was gonna ask you is on the D variance first. I mean, I think that's the key issue for me. I mean, we have to discuss it, whether or not we're going to grant the D variance and the other variances. I don't know what you want to do with those.
Well, but I think you need to take this differently than we've had in the past as the whole.
Okay.
Because by
And
granting the
that's
D
what I meant.
variance,
I'm
yes,
kind of
but
looking at
granting,
that.
right, if you grant the D, if someone moves to grant the D variance, it would be inclusive of the height, of the soil removal, of the parking, etc. So all of that, you have to decide whether or not all of that outweighs.
Right. And then that was my question to you. I didn't answer it right, but ask it right, but you answered it right. So that.
Right. And in the event that this is successful, then the site plan would be approved also. If there's a denial, then all those other items would be denied.
Okay, thank you.
Any other board members have questions? Because Mr. Wagner said he's going to make a motion.
Well, I was going to defer to the chairwoman first, but I shouldn't say.
Okay.
Do any board members have questions?
So I was, before I make a motion, I was just going to indicate that, first of all, I thought everybody did a great job. I know these things get frustrating, and I know I speak for myself. I'm sure I can for most of the board too, that, we have these dozens of times a year. And so, we want to do everything possible to accommodate, the growth of our community, and at the same time protect our citizens and, concerns, et cetera. And, I don't want anyone to think we don't take that serious. And I don't always say that because but I wanted to say that there are a lot of people here, and, we didn't put 25 or 30 hours in not to listen to you. So hope you feel that that's the case. But in this instance, I often look for many years I've been on the board, and look for opportunities to, to understand that the master plan needs to be flexible and grow with the town. And in that regard, that's what the variance process is for, and the zoning board's for. In this one, though, I have to be honest, I'm the reexamination in 2004, I feel like requires me to absolutely disregard a number of things that I think indirectly say something to us with this application. I think that that reexamination based upon what was going on then needs to guide us. And I feel like in order to vote yes on this application, would need to ignore all of that, and I can't in this case. So I'm not going to be voting yes for this. I'm actually, my motion will be for to deny this application based upon the fact that I think that while it's an inherently beneficial use, the substantial detriments to me start with an absolute disregard of our master plan for this particular property based upon the history of it and specific to it. That's how I view the reexamination, combined with the standards of the Sika case mainly that really guide us here. And so for me, that breathes in everything else, right, that I need to consider. It blends in now. You know, what are those detriments that I've heard about from everyone? And I'll say it straight out. You know, everyone presented, you know, their testimony to the best of their ability, and in this case, the best of their ability was, we don't know exactly who's going to operate this. We don't know, and I know that in a lot of instances that might not matter, but in this one, to me, it does. My personal and professional experience with these facilities is that they are so susceptible and volatile to the economics of healthcare, which is, I mean, it's massive for this country. And I think that while these obviously that there are needs here, but you know, we haven't presented that necessarily. We've, you know, not even the beginnings of a feasibility study that might support your certificate of need application someday, which honestly, I'm not so sure you can't be proceeding with right now. But again, I wasn't convinced one way or the other. Maybe strategically you don't want to, that's fine. But strategically, what I believe is being presented here is an application with a lot of folks who are investing in this if it can go. And at the same time, I have to balance the interests of the public and our master plan that was re-examined specifically in 2004 related to this property. And I'd have to disregard all of that. I think that what that re-examination did was to say, be real careful what you put here. And here's maybe how you want to do it if you do it. And I think we've done it with Cedar Village. I don't know, as far as further development on this property, you know, this application in the way it's been presented right now to me is not complete in my mind enough for me to feel good about it. But also it just, no matter how you slice it, dice it, or try to accommodate as many folks as you can, it just flies in the face of our master plan and its most recent re-examination related here. So that's generally my basis. It's the, you know, sort of the speculative nature, I think, of the way in which this application comes to us. That's my view, and it's bolstered a bit more by the lack of need specifically here in this area. This area meaning that particular location. We are sandwiched between two large hospital facilities, and I know these facilities are going to be expanding out. And you know, you mentioned a silver tsunami, but at the same point in time, we don't have any specifics as to why that tsunami needs to be placed there. So that's just where I'm coming from, and I wanted to express it, and I appreciate the opportunity.
So you made a motion?
I made a motion to deny the application on those grounds for me.
I'll second.
Who seconded? I'm sorry.
I'll second.
Mr. Ashkenazi.
Yes.
Mr. Ashkenazi. Okay, yeah. So at this point, appropriate motion has been made and seconded, and Amy will call the roll. But I would ask each of the first, only 7. Remember, somebody gets lucky and doesn't have to vote. And the applicant needs 5 affirmative votes for the public. In other words, if he gets 4 yeses and 3 nos, it still fails. It has to have 5 affirmative votes because it is a D variance under the statute. I'd ask that the members, as they vote, to please express the reasons for their vote so that I can better include them in the appropriate resolution of determination.
But Mark, a yes is a no vote, correct?
Okay, if you vote,
yeah.
Okay, this is a denial. You vote yes to deny.
That's what my question was. Thank you.
If you want to deny, you vote yes. If we get, and I should have done it backwards. I apologize. The applicant needs 5 affirmative votes. If this motion does not carry to deny, then we have to go back the other way to approve, but that would then need 5 affirmative votes. It's the way the statute works. So if Amy, if you could call the roll, and if you're denying, you vote yes, and you tell me your reasons. If you don't want to deny and you want to approve it, you vote no to this motion.
Okay. Mr. Manel,
So my vote would be yes to deny the application.
Okay, yeah. Any reasons or?
I think that it truly does conflict with the with the master plan. That's my biggest concern. I think the application is not complete in my in my eyes. We didn't have the opportunity to hear from about the specifics of how the facility would be operated, et cetera. And I really didn't see a demonstration for the particular location that this facility was going to be placed in. So those are the reasons that I vote to deny.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
so do I have to call Mr. Van Wagner?
He was, yes, he voted. He made the motion, how he votes.
Okay.
You, a simple yes or no would be fine because we know your reasons.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Ashkenazi?
Yes. And I would almost reiterate what Mr. Van Wagner said. I cannot disregard the master plan. And those are my reasons.
Okay. Mr. Mamie?
I also vote yes to deny on a number of grounds. First, reiterating what Mr. Van Wagner expressed so eloquently about how this is really in conflict with the 2004 re-examination of the master plan. Additionally, I feel like the need in this location has not been adequately expressed. And personally, I know there's another similar facility going up literally just maybe 1,000 feet from the border of Ocean Township on West Park Avenue, just over the border in Tinton Falls. And like I said, we didn't really get a quantified, an objective account of what the need was for this facility and in this location. And lastly, and probably very importantly, the environmental concerns reflected in the Environmental Commission's report, I don't think were adequately addressed. And on those grounds, I vote to deny the application.
Which is a yes vote to this motion. Thank you.
Yes. Ms. Tallarico?
Thank you. I also vote yes to deny this application on, many of the grounds of what my colleagues have already discussed, especially northern quality concerns that will impact the neighboring residents, the destruction of the wetlands, so the environmental concerns, traffic safety concerns, going against the master plan, and what the actual need is for this specific location. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. DeGennaro?
I'm also voting yes to deny the application. I mean, I think the board has spoken to just about every reason why the application should be denied. The only thing I'll add on top of what they mentioned already, and this just comes from experience based off of my life and what I do for a living in construction. I mean, the impact on the neighboring facilities during the 2+ years of work that's going to take place would be a hardship on the neighborhood that I don't think they should endure. So that above and beyond everything everybody else said that I agree with, I'm voting to deny the application.
Okay. Madam Chair?
I vote yes to deny, and to echo the sentiments from my colleagues. There is an inherently beneficial use However, the first part of the test is to define the magnitude of the benefit. In my opinion, this has not been done. The certificate of need, which has been mentioned, no study to verify the need. The additional large facility that is, I believe, approximately a mile away, the environmental concerns. There's just a question as to the magnitude of this benefit.
So it's a vote of 7 of the full, that's the full board, 7 that are authorized to vote. Obviously, the motion carries and the application is denied.
Okay, and I believe we just need a motion to close.
Before you close, everyone, I want to thank everyone for all of your efforts. I mean, this has been a very long, drawn out process, and you're all volunteers on it. I really want to thank you for your time and your efforts. I know it's not easy.
Yes, and thank you for those who did have to watch video to get caught up so that we could make an informed decision. So I also thank the community as well as the attorneys for providing their remarks, as well as the witnesses. So is there a motion to close?
I'll make a motion
To adjourn.
To adjourn.
To adjourn.
Sorry. I didn't hear, I'm sorry. Who
That was
made the
Mr.
motion?
DeGenero. Motion. is-
Seconded, third.
Good.
Okay,
Thank you all for the town. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Thank you very much and have a good evening.